Farmer perplexed by sand-covered car, and the dog sniffs out a hidden secret. Samuel Miller never imagined that that Tuesday morning would change his life forever. At 58, he had seen it all on his arid land in the West Texas countryside, but nothing had prepared him for what he would discover that day. It all started when Duke, his faithful German shepherd, began barking desperately toward an area of the property where there had never been anything but sand and a few dry bushes. The dog ran in circles, sniffed the ground intensely, and ran back to Samuel, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "What is it, Duke? What are you sensing out there, boy?" Samuel asked, adjusting the straw hat on his head. The dog barked once more and ran again toward the same spot. Curious and a little worried about Duke's strange behavior, Samuel decided to follow the animal. The sun was already high on that late September morning, and the heat was beginning to bear down on the dry land of the high plains. As they approached the spot, Samuel began to make out something that didn't look natural among the mounds of sand. There was a strange shape, half buried, reflecting a bit of sunlight. He squinted, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Oh my God," he muttered when he finally recognized what it was. Partially buried in the sand was a car, a faded blue Ford Escort, its paint peeling from age, almost completely covered by the fine sand the wind had piled up over the years. Duke ran around the vehicle, sniffing intensely and scratching the sand at specific spots. Samuel felt a knot in his stomach. In over 20 years of tending that land, he had never seen that car there. How could a vehicle just appear out of nowhere, buried in the middle of his property? There were no nearby roads, and the terrain was completely flat as far as the eye could see. "How the hell did this end up here?" he said to himself, walking cautiously around the car. Duke was getting more and more agitated, focusing his attention on a specific area near the vehicle's trunk. The dog scratched at the sand with determination, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. Samuel crouched down and began removing the sand with his hands where Duke indicated. At first he found only more sand, but after a few minutes of digging, his fingers touched something solid and metallic. "Duke, I think you found something, partner." More carefully, Samuel continued removing the sand until he could identify the object. It was a small metal box the size of a shoebox, completely rusted but still intact. His hands trembled slightly as he held it. The box was locked, but the rust had corroded the lock so much that it took only a little effort to open it. Inside, wrapped in thick plastic, were several documents yellowed by time and a few photographs. Samuel picked up the first document and felt his legs go weak. It was a property deed, his own land, but the name listed as the buyer was not his. It was Julian Miller's, his younger brother. "It can't be," he whispered, rereading the document several times. Julian had disappeared nearly 25 years earlier, when Samuel was 33. One morning, he was simply no longer home. He left a note saying he needed to go live his life somewhere else and didn't want to be a burden to anyone. Samuel never heard from him again. But there was the proof that Julian had purchased exactly the land adjacent to Samuel's. The same land Samuel had been leasing for years from an owner he had never met in person, always dealing only with a representative. Duke kept sniffing and scratching at another spot. This time, they found a small leather-bound notebook, protected by more plastic. Samuel opened it carefully and immediately recognized Julian's handwriting. March 15, 1999. I finally managed to buy the land next to Samuel's. He doesn't know yet. I want it to be a surprise. When I get back, we'll join the properties and work together like we always dreamed of as boys. Samuel felt his eyes fill with tears. He kept reading. The doctor said I have a few years ahead of me if I take care of my diabetes properly. I'll get treatment here in San Antonio and then come back home. I don't want Samuel to worry. He already has enough problems with the drought and the loans. Samuel's hands trembled as he turned the pages. There were dozens of diary entries, all talking about plans to improve the land, about medical treatments, about how much he missed home. June 2nd, 1999. I met a very good nurse here at the hospital. She said she has relatives in the West Texas countryside. I told her about Samuel, and she offered to bring news from me to him when she visits her family. But I'm not ready yet. I want to go back healed. Samuel stopped reading. A nurse? What nurse? He never received any news. Duke barked again, this time looking toward the road. A cloud of dust was approaching. It was Martha Thompson, his closest neighbor, in her old pickup truck. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. Martha Thompson climbed down from the pickup truck with her impressive agility for 65 years old. She took care of a small property about 2 miles from there and had known Samuel since he was a child. Samuel, what's all this commotion? I heard Duke barking from far away, she said, approaching. Samuel was still in shock, holding the diary in his hands. He looked at Martha Thompson and noticed something in her expression. Attention, as if she were trying to understand what was happening. Martha Thompson, do you know this car? Samuel asked, pointing at the partially buried Ford Escort. The woman stopped where she was. Her eyes widened slightly, and Samuel realized she knew something. Where did you get that diary, Samuel? She asked, avoiding answering the question. It was buried here, along with some documents. Martha Thompson, this diary is Julian's. My brother bought this land 25 years ago, and I never knew. Martha Thompson sighed deeply and approached slowly. Her hands were trembling slightly. Samuel, I need to tell you something. I should have told you a long time ago. What do you know about my brother? I knew him, Samuel. I met Julian after he left here. He stopped by here a few times over the years. Samuel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. What do you mean he stopped by? When? The first time was in 2001, 2 years after he left. He looked different, thinner, wearing glasses. He said he was being treated for an illness, but that he was getting better. And you never told me. He made me promise I wouldn't. He said he wanted to settle everything first, that he wanted to come back healed and with a surprise for you. He knew you were going through hard times here on the ranch, and he didn't want to be another problem. Samuel sat down on the sand, trying to process all that information. Duke came closer and rested his head on his lap as if he could feel his anguish. What surprise, Martha Thompson? The land, Samuel. He bought the neighboring land. He said that when he came back, you two would work together, expand the cattle operation, drill artesian wells. He had it all planned out. But he never came back. Martha Thompson sat down next to Samuel on the sand. The last time he was here was in 2004. He was much sicker, Samuel. The diabetes had gotten complicated, affected his kidneys. He knew he didn't have much time left, but he still had hope of getting better. Why did you never tell me any of this? Because he made me swear I wouldn't tell you until he could speak to you himself. And then, once we found out that he was no longer with us, I thought it would be best to leave things as they were. You were already suffering so much. Samuel felt a mix of anger and sadness. 25 years of his life, leasing land that actually belonged to his own brother. 25 years believing Julian had simply abandoned the family. How did you find out that he was gone? Remember the nurse he mentioned in his journal? Joyce. She's a distant cousin of mine. She's the one who told me when Julian passed away at the hospital in San Antonio in 2005. Nurse Joyce. Samuel repeated the name, remembering what he had read in the journal. She said Julian talked about you constantly, that his biggest regret was not having been brave enough to come back and tell you the truth about his illness. Duke suddenly got up and ran to another spot near the car, starting to sniff around again. This time he was focused near the driver's door. Looks like Duke is still finding things, Martha said. Samuel got up and walked over to where the dog was. He began clearing the sand from the car door and managed to open it with some effort. The interior was surprisingly well preserved, protected from the sand by the closed window. In the glove compartment he found more documents, receipts for medication, medical appointments, and a series of letters that were never sent, all addressed to him. Samuel opened the first letter with trembling hands. My dear brother Samuel, I know you must be angry with me for leaving without any explanation. I can't find the courage to come back and tell you the truth. I found out I have type 1 diabetes, and it's progressing quickly. The doctors say I might have a few years to live if I take good care of myself, but it could also be just a few months. I don't want you to watch me waste away. I don't want to be a burden. You already have so many problems with the ranch, with the drought, with the loans. I'd rather you remember me as I was, your stubborn little brother, who always wanted to help with the cattle. I'm working in San Antonio, saving every penny. I bought the land next to your ranch. When I get better, and I will get better because I have to, I'll come back and we'll work together like we always dreamed. Take care of yourself, my brother. Someday you'll understand why I had to leave. With love, Julian. The letter was dated April 1999, just 1 month after Julian had left home. Samuel felt tears rolling down his face. He looked at Martha, who was also moved. All those letters. He wrote them to me and never sent them. I think he was afraid of how you'd react. You two were always too proud. Samuel opened another letter, a more recent one. Samuel, 3 years have passed. I know you must hate me by now. Joyce tells me she's seen you in town sometimes, that you've been working too hard, that you've gotten thinner. I wish so much I could hug you and ask for your forgiveness. I wish I could tell you about the plans I have for our land. I found out there are underground springs exactly on the boundary between the properties. With the right wells, we can turn this dry region into productive land all year round. I found an agricultural engineer here in San Antonio who helped me put the whole project together. It's all drawn up, all calculated. When I come back, we're going to be prosperous, my brother. My health is stable. Not good, but stable. The doctors say that if I stick with the treatment properly, I could have several years ahead of me. Plenty of time for us to make our dream come true. I just need a little more courage to come home. Julian. That letter was dated 2002. Duke barked again and ran to the back of the car. This time, when Samuel and Martha went to check, they found something different, a small leather pouch buried in the sand. Inside the pouch was a detailed map of the region, with precise markings indicating underground water sources and a complete irrigation plan signed by an engineer from San Antonio. My God, Samuel murmured, studying the drawings. He really planned all of this. He was always smart, Samuel. Even as a child, he was the one who came up with the best solutions to the ranch's problems. Samuel kept examining the papers. There were budgets, equipment lists, work schedules. Julian had spent years planning the transformation of the land. Martha, do you know who the representative is that's always handled the lease on this land? Well, she hesitated. Actually, Samuel, it was me. Samuel stopped reading and looked at her, confused. What do you mean it was you? Julian asked me to take care of it. He left enough money to keep the land maintained and said that when the time was right I should transfer everything to you. But he also said I should only do that when you were ready to hear the whole truth. You've taken care of my land all these years, without me knowing it was mine. Not just yours, Samuel, ours, yours and Julian's. He left everything in both your names. Samuel felt dizzy. 25 years working as a leaseholder on land that was partly his. 25 years paying rent to a representative who was his own neighbor, managing an inheritance he didn't even know he had. Why now, Martha? Why did Duke find all of this just today? Maybe because you're ready to hear it. Maybe because it's time to make Julian's dreams come true. Duke ran up to them again, this time holding something in his mouth. It was another envelope, sealed and addressed. For Samuel, when everything has been revealed. Samuel opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a longer letter and a small key. My dear brother, if you're reading this letter, it means you've finally found everything I left hidden. You're probably angry with me, and you have every right to be. I made the hardest decision of my life when I hid my illness from you. But I did it to protect you. You were always the stronger brother, the one who took care of everyone, the one who shouldered the responsibilities. This time, I wanted to be the one taking care of you. The land is yours now. In truth, it was always as much yours as it was mine. I managed to save up enough money in San Antonio to not only buy the land, but also to implement the entire irrigation project. The money is deposited in an account that Martha has access to. She'll explain everything to you. The key that comes with this letter is to my office in San Antonio. It's on Heritage Road, number 247, room 12. There you'll find all the signed contracts, the entire detailed plan, and a surprise I prepared especially for you. I know you must be wondering why I hid the truck here. It's simple. This was our secret place when we were kids. Remember when we used to sneak away from our chores and come play here? You used to say that one day we'd build our own ranch in this very spot. I made your dream come true, Samuel. Our ranch is ready to be built. Forgive me for leaving without explanations. Forgive me for hiding the truth for so long, but know that every day away from home was a day I used to work on our future. Take good care of the land, take good care of the animals, and be happy, my brother. With all my love and longing, Julian P.S. Duke was always a very smart dog. I'm sure he helped you find all of this when the time was right. Samuel couldn't stop crying. Martha stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. He loved you so much, Samuel. Everything he did was out of love. But I could have helped him, Martha. I could have taken care of him during his illness. We were a family. You know Julian. He was always stubborn. He wanted to do things his own way. Duke lay down beside Samuel, resting his head on his lap again. The dog seemed to understand that his mission was complete. How did Duke know where to find all of this? Samuel asked. Dogs have memories we can't even imagine. Duke was a puppy when Julian still lived here. Maybe he caught his scent even after all these years. Samuel looked around. The buried car, the documents, the letters, the detailed project. It all made sense now. Julian had turned his illness into motivation to create something greater. Martha, you said he left money to implement the project. Yes, a considerable amount. Julian worked as an accountant in San Antonio all those years, saved practically everything he earned. He was determined to make that dream come true. And you took care of all of this by yourself for 20 years. It wasn't hard, Samuel. The land practically took care of itself with the money he left behind. And I knew that one day the right time would come to reveal everything. Why is now the right time? Martha smiled sadly. Because you're ready to forgive. Before, you were still too hurt by his departure. Now, you're mature enough to understand that sometimes people do the wrong things for the right reasons. Samuel got up and walked over to the buried car. He placed his hand on the hood, warmed by the sun. He drove this car all the way out here the last time he came. Yes, in 2004. He was already very weak, but he insisted on coming, said he wanted to leave the car where you two used to play as children, said it was symbolic. And you helped him bury everything? I did. He knew he was nearing the end, Samuel. He wanted to make sure you would find everything when the time was right. Samuel looked at Duke, who was sitting patiently watching it all. And how did he know Duke would lead me here? He didn't. But he knew you. He knew you're curious, that you wouldn't rest until you understood why Duke was acting strange. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. A new cloud of dust was approaching down the road. This time it was a newer truck, white. Samuel didn't recognize the vehicle. Are you expecting someone else? He asked Martha. Actually, yes. I called someone before coming here. I thought it would be important for her to be present when you discovered everything. The truck stopped, and a woman around 50 years old got out. She was dark-haired, with grey hair tied back in a ponytail, and wore hospital scrubs. Samuel, said Martha, this is Joyce, the nurse who took care of Julian in San Antonio. Samuel felt his heart race. He was finally going to meet the person who had been with his brother during his final years. Joyce approached with a sad but welcoming smile. It's an honor to meet you, Samuel. Julian talked about you every day. You were with him when he... I was, and I can assure you that until his very last moment, he was planning to come back home. Until his very last moment, he believed you two would work together on this land. Joyce opened a bag she was carrying and pulled out a large envelope. He asked me to give this to you when the time was right. They're photos, Samuel. Photos of everything he did in San Antonio, his office, the projects, the people he met. He wanted you to know that even from far away, he never stopped thinking of you as a family. Samuel opened the envelope and saw dozens of photographs. Julian in a small office, surrounded by plants and agricultural project blueprints. Julian in the hospital, thinner but smiling, holding a certificate from an irrigation course. Julian with Joyce and other colleagues, clearly part of a chosen family he had built in San Antonio. He made friends there? Asked Samuel. Many. He had a special gift for helping people. He knew so much about agriculture that several families from the region would come to him for advice. He never charged anything, saying he was practicing for when he came back home. Samuel kept flipping through the photos. In one of them, Julian was standing next to a sign, Dry Creek Project, Sustainable Irrigation for the High Plains. What is that? That was the pilot project he developed. He got government funding to test the irrigation system in a small community near San Antonio. It worked out so well that the project was expanded to other regions. My brother developed a project for the government? Joyce smiled proudly. Your brother became one of the leading authorities on sustainable irrigation in the state. The knowledge he gained caring for the family lands turned into solutions that helped hundreds of families. Samuel looked at Martha Thompson, still trying to process everything. Did you know about this? I did. Joyce kept me informed about everything. Julian wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, you would know that he had used his time away from home to become a better person. Joyce bent down and pulled another envelope from her bag. Samuel, this is the last gift Julian prepared for you. It's an official proposal from the state government. They want to implement his project here on this land as a model for the entire region. If you accept, the state invests all the money needed for the implementation, you keep ownership of the land, and you also receive a percentage of the profits when the project is expanded to other areas. Samuel took the document with trembling hands. It was an official proposal, stamped and signed, offering a partnership that would transform his arid lands into a reference center for sustainable agriculture. When was this prepared? Julian was working on it in the last months of his life. He knew he was running out of time, so he sped up all the processes. The proposal was approved 2 months after he passed away. And why did you take so long to come to me? Joyce and Martha Thompson exchanged glances. Because the proposal had a condition, explained Joyce. Julian specified that it could only be presented to you when you discovered the whole truth about his illness and the plans he had made. He wanted to make sure you would understand that everything was done out of love, not obligation. Samuel sat back down on the sand, trying to take in all that information. In a single day, he had discovered that his brother hadn't abandoned him, that there was land that had been his for 20 years, that there was $1 million project waiting for his approval, and that Julian had become a far more impressive person than he had ever imagined. Duke approached again and started sniffing near a large rock that was half buried in the sand. Looks like Duke isn't done yet, said Martha Thompson. Samuel got up and walked over to where the dog was. When he removed the sand around the rock, he discovered it wasn't a natural rock. It was a concrete marker with something engraved on it. Cleaning it more carefully, he managed to read, Silas and Julian Ranch, Brothers Forever, 1999. He placed a marker here? Asked Samuel, moved. It was the first thing he did when he bought the land, explained Joyce. He said he wanted to mark the spot where your new life together would begin. Samuel stroked Duke, who finally seemed satisfied with all the discoveries. You're a very special dog, my friend. Julian was right about you. At that moment, another pickup truck approached. This time, Samuel recognized the vehicle. It was his neighbor, Old Bill's, who took care of a smaller property across the road. Old Bill got out of the pickup truck with his typical practical High Plains manner. At 60 years old, he was known in the region for his honesty and good sense. Samuel, I heard you folks found something interesting around here, said Old Bill, approaching. How did you find out? Boy, in the countryside news travels faster than a spooked horse. Martha Thompson's daughter called my wife, who called the neighbor, who sent her son to tell me. Samuel laughed for the first time that day. That was typical of life in the High Plains. Within a few hours, the whole community would know what had happened. And what did you come here for, Old Bill? I came to help you with something. You remember I knew your brother Julian, right? I remember. You two were friends when we were younger. That's right. What you don't know is that Julian came to see me before he left for San Antonio. He told me about the illness and asked me a favor. Samuel felt a knot in his stomach. One more person who had known about Julian's illness before him. What favor? Old Bill took an envelope from his shirt pocket. He gave me this and said that if you ever found out the whole truth, I should hand it over. It's a letter for you, but it's also a check. Samuel opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter and a check signed by Julian, dated 2004. Samuel, if you're reading this, it means Old Bill kept his promise. This check is for you to buy new cattle and equipment for the ranch. It's the money I saved in the early years in San Antonio, before I managed to buy the land. I know you'll try to give it back to someone because you were always too proud. But this time accept it, my brother. It's my way of asking forgiveness for lying about being fine when I left home. Use this money to start implementing our dreams while you wait for approval of the bigger projects, Julian. The check was for a considerable amount, enough to buy a small herd and completely modernize the ranch's structure. Old Bill, you kept this for 20 years? I did. And it wasn't easy, no. Several times I felt like telling you everything, especially when I saw you struggling alone here at the ranch. But I promised your brother I'd only hand it over when you were ready to accept help. And how do you know I'm ready now? Old Bill smiled. Because you're not angry anymore. When a person is angry, they can't accept gifts. You were mad at Julian for leaving, now you understand why he left. Samuel looked around. There were 3 people who had kept secrets about his brother for decades, all waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. How many more people know things I don't? Joyce laughed. A few. Julian made friends in San Antonio who would love to meet you. He talked about you so much that everyone is curious to meet the famous brother. Famous brother? To him, you were the best rancher in the world. He told stories about how you saved the ranch from the drought, about how you took care of the animals, about your wisdom in dealing with the land. You were his hero, Samuel. That revelation left Samuel even more emotional. All those years, he had felt like a failure for not being able to make the ranch prosper. Discovering that his brother saw him as a hero completely changed his perspective on himself. Duke barked softly and ran toward the road. Another vehicle was approaching. "My God, we're going to have a crowd here," said Martha Thompson, laughing. The approaching car was a grey sedan, a bit more modern than the vehicles in the region. 2 people got out, a man of about 40 in a suit, and a young woman who seemed to be in her mid-20s. The man approached with a professional but friendly smile. "Good afternoon. Are you the Miller family?" "We are," Samuel replied, still a bit wary. "My name is Dr. Richard Anderson, and this is my assistant, Megan. We're from the Department of Agriculture. We came to talk about the Dry Creek project." Joyce stepped forward. "Samuel, this is the engineer who worked with Julian on developing the project. They came to explain the technical details." Dr. Anderson looked around, observing the buried car and all the scattered documents. "I see you've discovered the treasure Julian hid here." "You knew my brother?" Samuel asked. "I knew him, and very well. Julian was one of the most dedicated men I've ever met in my life. When he came to our department with the idea of creating a sustainable irrigation system, at first we thought it was just another amateur project. But after talking to him for 5 minutes, we realized we were in the presence of a genius." Megan opened a folder and took out several photographs. "These are photos of the pilot project we implemented based on Julian's ideas. It turned a completely dry area of 50 hectares into productive land year-round. The photos showed an area that had been as arid as Samuel's land, but was now green, with organized crops and grazing animals." "Is that possible here?" Samuel asked. "It's not only possible, it's guaranteed," Dr. Anderson replied. "Your brother did detailed geological studies of this region. There are abundant underground aquifers right below your land. With drilling the right wells and a proper irrigation system, you can turn this area into the breadbasket of the region." Old Bill approached, clearly interested. "Doctor, would this work on the neighboring land too?" "Perfectly. In fact, it's ideal that several properties participate in the project. That way we can create a regional cooperative that will be much more efficient and profitable for everyone." Samuel looked at Old Bill, then at Martha Thompson. "Would you be interested in participating?" "Samuel," Martha said, "I've been waiting for you to discover all this for 20 years. Of course I'm interested." "Me too," Old Bill agreed. "I've always dreamed of seeing this region prosperous again." Dr. Anderson smiled. "Excellent. With 3 properties together, we can implement the full project. The initial investment is entirely from the government. You keep ownership of the land, and the financial return starts showing up as early as the first year." Megan showed more documents. "We have authorization to start the work immediately, as soon as you sign the agreement. The drilling can begin next week." Samuel felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Everything was happening so fast. "And what if it doesn't work out?" Joyce put her hand on his arm. "Samuel, your brother tested every detail of this project. He wouldn't put you at any risk. Julian was far too cautious for that." Dr. Anderson agreed. "Julian's project is so well-founded that it's already been approved for implementation in 12 different regions across West Texas. This will be pilot project number 1, and you'll be the pioneers." Duke ran up to Dr. Anderson and started sniffing his briefcase. The engineer laughed and bent down to pet the dog. "Julian told me about Duke. He said he was the smartest dog he'd ever known." "He really is special," Samuel said. "He's the one who led us to all these discoveries today." Megan looked around curiously. "How did you find all this?" "Julian said he had hidden a few things here, but we never imagined it would be this much." Martha Thompson quickly told how Duke had started acting strange that morning and how he had guided Samuel to each discovery. "Impressive," Dr. Anderson said. "It seems everything aligned for this to happen exactly today." "Why today?" Samuel asked. "Why did Duke decide to reveal everything today of all days?" Joyce smiled mysteriously. "Today is September 28th, Samuel. It's Julian's birthday." Samuel felt a chill. He had completely forgotten it was Julian's birthday. With everything that had happened over the past few years, he'd lost the habit of keeping track of important dates. "He would have turned 58 today," Joyce continued. "Maybe Duke felt it was the perfect moment to celebrate Julian's life by revealing all the gifts he left behind." Everyone was silent for a moment, absorbing the emotional weight of that coincidence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, since we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. Dr. Anderson broke the silence. "Samuel, I need to tell you one more thing about your brother. Julian didn't just develop the project for this land. He also created a foundation." "A foundation?" Megan opened another folder. "The Miller Brothers Foundation for Sustainable Rural Development." Julian left a considerable amount of money to fund similar projects in other parts of the Southwest. The foundation has been up and running for 5 years now, helping small-scale farmers implement sustainable irrigation systems. Samuel picked up the foundation's documents. At the top was a photo of him and Julian as children, playing with a calf. "He used a picture of us. He said you two always represented for him the very best of rural West Texas life. The foundation uses that image to inspire other families to work together." "And who runs the foundation?" "A team of engineers and social workers in San Antonio. But there's a special clause. You can take over as president of the foundation at any time if you want." Samuel was beginning to feel overwhelmed by so much information and responsibility. "I don't know the first thing about running a foundation." "You don't need to understand it right now," said Joyce. "Julian knew you wouldn't feel comfortable with it right away. That's why he left everything set up so it could run on its own. If one day you want to get more involved, the option is there. If not, the foundation keeps doing its work." Old Bill walked over to Samuel. "Son, do you realize what your brother did? He turned the longing he felt for you into energy to help hundreds of families." "How so?" "Every time he missed home, instead of getting down, he channeled that energy into working on the projects. It's like every tear of homesickness became an artesian well for somebody out there." The way Old Bill put it touched Samuel deeply. For the first time, he was able to fully understand Julian's perspective. Dr. Anderson checked his watch. "Samuel, I know it's a lot to take in for one day. How about we set up a meeting for next week so you have time to think it all over?" "Actually," Samuel replied, surprising himself, "I don't need to think. If Julian spent 20 years planning this, if he was certain it would work, then I trust him. You want to sign the agreement today, then? I do, but I have one condition, which is the project will be implemented exactly as Julian planned it. No changes, no improvements. I want to honor his vision completely. Dr. Anderson smiled broadly. That was exactly the condition Julian specified. He said that if you accepted the project, it would only be if it was done exactly the way he had planned it. Megan set up the paperwork on the hood of the pickup truck. Samuel signed first, then Martha Thompson, and Old Bill. "Congratulations," said Dr. Anderson. "You have just become the pioneers of the largest sustainable rural transformation project in the Southwest." When all the papers were signed, Duke lay down in the shade of the pickup truck, finally at ease. It seemed as though he knew his mission had been fulfilled. Joyce approached Samuel. "There's one more thing I need to give you. It's the birthday gift Julian prepared for you in his last year of life." She opened her purse and took out a small package wrapped in plain paper. Samuel opened it carefully. Inside was a simple but well-kept wristwatch and a note. "For Samuel on my 53rd birthday. This watch belonged to our father. I took it with me when I went to San Antonio because it made me feel connected to our family. Now I want you to have it back. Every time you look at the time, remember that the time we spent apart wasn't lost time. It was time invested in our future. Happy birthday to me, and thank you for letting me fulfill our dreams, even from a distance. Julian." Samuel put the watch on his wrist. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for him. "Julian had hands the same size as yours," Joyce observed. "He always said the two of you were more alike than you realized." The sun was beginning to set, painting the high plains sky in shades of gold and orange. The whole group gathered around Julian's buried car. "What are we going to do with the car?" Martha Thompson asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "We're going to leave it here, but we're going to do something different." "What?" "We're going to turn this place into a memorial. Not just for Julian, but for all the brothers, sons and fathers who had to leave home to take care of their families from a distance." Dr. Richard Anderson thought the idea was interesting. "We can include this in the project, create a small memorial here, and use this place as a starting point for technical visits from other regions that want to implement the project." "I like the idea," said Old Bill. "It will inspire other people." Joyce was visibly moved. Julian would be very happy knowing that his story will help other families. Megan took some notes. "We could schedule the official project launch together with the memorial's opening. How about in December, when the first seedlings are already in the ground?" "Perfect," Samuel agreed. Duke got up and walked over to the concrete marker that marked the Silas and Julian ranch. He sat down beside the marker, as if posing for a photo. "I think Duke approves of the plans," Martha Thompson laughed. "He's a very wise dog," said Samuel, approaching to pet the animal. "He knew exactly what we needed to find out and when we needed to find it out." As night was falling, Dr. Richard Anderson and Megan got ready to head back to San Antonio. "Samuel," said Dr. Richard Anderson before leaving, "if you'd like to see the office Julian kept in San Antonio, you're more than welcome. His colleagues would love to meet you." "I'd like that. Maybe next week." "Great. Joyce can take you there whenever you want." Joyce agreed. "It would be my pleasure. There are many people in San Antonio who knew Julian and have stories to tell about him." After Dr. Richard Anderson and Megan left, the group grew closer. Samuel, Martha Thompson, Old Bill and Joyce sat on the sand, watching the first stars appear in the clear high plains sky. "You know," said Samuel, "I spent 20 years feeling abandoned, as if Julian had rejected me. Now I've found out he spent 20 years working to give me a better life." "Love sometimes shows itself in ways we don't understand at the time," Joyce observed. "Julian loved you too much to let you watch him suffer. But I could have helped him not feel so alone." "Samuel," said Martha Thompson, "you did help. Even without knowing it, you helped. Every time Julian remembered you taking care of the ranch, being strong and responsible, it gave him strength to keep fighting." Old Bill agreed. "Your brother wasn't alone, Samuel. He was surrounded by people who respected and admired him, and he knew you were here, keeping the family tradition alive." Samuel looked at Duke, who was sleeping peacefully against the concrete marker. Do you think Duke really sensed that today was the right day? Joyce smiled. I believe animals feel things we can't understand. Maybe Duke sensed that you were finally ready to forgive and move on. Forgive who? Forgive Julian for leaving. Forgive yourself for not stopping him from going. Forgive life for tearing you apart. Samuel reflected on those words. Joyce was right. All those years, he had carried a weight of guilt and resentment that kept him from being truly happy. You know, said Samuel, this morning I woke up thinking it would be an ordinary day. I was going to tend to the animals, check the fences, maybe fix the windmill that's been acting up. And look what the day turned into, laughed Martha Thompson. It turned into the most important day of my life, the day I found out I was never alone. Old Bill stood up and looked out toward his land. Samuel, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. What are you going to do now? I mean, how does all of this change your life? Samuel thought for a moment. You know, Old Bill, I think the right question isn't what this changes, but what it reveals. I found out I already had everything I needed. Land, friends, purpose, I just didn't know it. What do you mean? I always thought I needed more money, more land, more success to be happy. But today I found out my brother spent 20 years working to give me exactly that, and I was already happy even before I knew I had it. Joyce was moved by Samuel's reflection. Julian would be so proud to hear you say that. You think so? I'm sure of it. He always said you were the wisest person he knew because you knew how to be happy with what you had. Samuel stood up and walked over to the buried car. He placed his hand on the hood again. Julian, my brother, he said out loud, I forgive you for leaving. And I thank you for dedicating your life to looking after me from afar. I promise to honor your dreams and make our land become everything you imagined. Duke woke up at the sound of Samuel's voice and came closer, resting his head against his leg. And you, my friend, said Samuel, petting the dog, thank you for waiting 20 years to reveal all of this to me. You knew I wasn't ready before, didn't you? Duke wagged his tail, as if he understood every word. Martha Thompson came closer. Samuel, can I make a suggestion? Of course. How about we start planning a celebration for the project's inauguration? We can invite the whole community, the folks from San Antonio who knew Julian, and throw a big celebration. I like that idea. Julian always loved parties. Joyce perked up. I can arrange for Julian's friends from San Antonio to come. They'll be so happy to meet you and see the project being put into action. And I can handle the preparations here in the region, offered Old Bill. I know everyone around here. Samuel smiled, feeling truly part of a community for the first time in many years. Then it's settled. We're going to throw the biggest celebration this region has ever seen. As the night went on, everyone said their goodbyes. Joyce was the first to leave, promising to come back the following week to take Samuel to San Antonio. Samuel, she said before getting into the pickup, thank you for letting me be part of this discovery. Taking care of Julian was one of the best experiences of my professional life, and seeing his dreams come true through you is deeply moving. Thank you for taking care of him, Joyce, and for keeping all those secrets until the right moment. Then it was Old Bill's turn. Samuel, I can't wait to see those green, productive lands. It's going to be like going back in time to when our parents were young and this region was thriving. We're going to make that dream come true together, my friend. Martha Thompson was the last to leave. Samuel, you have no idea what a relief it is to finally be able to tell you all of this. Keeping these secrets for 20 years has been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Why did you do it, Martha? Why did you take on that responsibility? Because I saw the love Julian had for you, and because I knew that one day this moment would come, and it would all make sense. Thank you for believing in me even before I believed in myself. After everyone had left, Samuel stood alone with Duke at the discovery site. The stars shone brightly in the clear High Plains sky, and the full moon illuminated the buried car and all the scattered documents. Samuel sat down next to Duke and looked at the wristwatch that had belonged to their father. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. "Duke, do you know what amazes me most about all of this?" The dog looked at him attentively. "It's that Julian never lost hope. Even knowing he was sick, even being far from home, he never stopped believing that one day we would work together again." Duke rested his head on Samuel's lap. "And you? How did you manage to keep this secret for so long? How did you know exactly the right moment to reveal everything?" The dog just wagged his tail gently. Samuel looked around at all the discoveries of the day. The documents, the letters, the government project, the foundation's proposal. In a single day, his life had completely changed. But more important than that, in a single day, he had rediscovered his brother's love and the strength of his community. "You know, Duke, I think Julian was right about one thing. Sometimes people do the best things for others when they're far away, because when we're close, we worry so much about the small details that we lose sight of the big dreams." Samuel got up and began carefully gathering all the documents. Tomorrow would be an important day. He would have to start understanding all the technical details of the project, get to know the government's proposals better, and decide how he wanted to be involved with the foundation. But today had been the day of discovery, the day of revelation, the day of forgiveness. "Let's go home, Duke. Tomorrow we start a new life." The dog got up immediately, as if he had been waiting for exactly those words. As they walked back to the main house on the ranch, Samuel turned one last time to look at the spot where everything had been revealed. Julian's car was there, half buried in the sand, a silent guardian of all the dreams his brother had built. Tomorrow, that place would become the starting point for a new era of prosperity for the entire region. But today, it had simply been the place where two brothers found each other again across time, longing, and unconditional love. Samuel put his hand in his pocket and felt the stack of letters Julian had written but never sent. Tomorrow he would read them all, one by one. But he knew it didn't matter what was written in them. What mattered was that Julian had thought of him every day for 20 years, and now, finally, they could work together to make their childhood dreams come true. Duke ran ahead, showing the way back home. But this time, it wasn't just the way back. It was the path to the future. The end. So, what did you think of this moving story about Samuel and his brother Julian? Tell us in the comments which part touched your heart the most, and whether you've ever experienced something similar in your family. Leave a like if this story managed to move you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Your participation makes all the difference.